Welcome back to the series. We are in the episode number 6 of Power BI interview question series. We have covered few questions in the previous tutorials or previous videos. I have attached the link of the complete playlist in the description. You can have a check. Now, proceeding with episode number 6 with more questions. Here, the very first question or the question number 25 in continuation to the previous series. The question is, what is the difference between a calculated column and a measure in text? So, the key difference is calculated columns are calculated or computing when loading the data, right, or refreshing the data, and it is stored in the data model itself. And due to this reason, it stores the space in our data model, while measures are calculated in the data visualization itself. They are not basically stored in the data model, and they are not loaded during the data load, right? They are just loaded and calculated in the while when they are placed in the data visualization. Next difference is calculated columns are useful for creating new columns based on the data we have as of now or the existing data, while measures are used for aggregations and calculations, right? So these are the key differences between calculated column and a measure in text. Next question we have is, what is row context and filter context in DEX? Row context refers to the current row being evaluated in a calculation. That means when we are doing or performing some calculation, the current row we are calculating for refers to row context, right? The row means row by row calculation we are doing refers to the row context. And while we are applying set of filters to a data model when performing some calculation is called as filter context. Functions like calculate are used to modify the filter context. So we have some set of DEX functions which are used to modify filter context. Now, next question we have is, what is the difference between calculate and filter? Now we have seen there are functions like calculate and there is filter context. So what is the difference between calculate and filter functions? Calculate is used to modify the filter context of a calculation by applying additional filters or removing the existing filters, allowing for more complex calculations. So, calculate is itself a function, and inside calculate function, we used to specify some calculation, and on that particular calculation, we can modify the context of the filter, right? And we can add more filters or remove the existing filters and do some complex calculations. Next is, filter function is used basically to apply filters to a table or column and returns a filter table or column itself as a result. Now, next question we have is, can you use DAX to create hierarchical relationships in Power BI? So, answer is yes, we have hierarchical relationships specific DAX functions, right? And these functions are path contains path items, etc. There are more functions, and these functions help establish parent-child relationships between columns in a table. Next question we have is, how can you optimize query performance in Power BI using text? So if we made if we create text measures or calculated columns, there could be the query performance in the Power BI while loading the data. So how can we optimize that? So very first query optimization technique is use calculated measures instead of calculated columns whenever possible, because calculated columns occupy space irrespective to calculated measures. Calculated measures do not occupy space and they are calculated on the fly when we put them into the measures. Then use proper indexing on the data source, right? Next, you minimize the number of columns and rows loaded into the data model. So uh, don't load the number of columns or number of rows, and filter out the data which we don't require. Optimize DEX formulas by avoiding unnecessary calculations and iterating over the rows. Enable query folding whenever applicable to push calculations to the data source. Next, how can you optimize performance when working with large datasets in Power BI using DEX? Now, l- how can we optimize performance with large datasets? Now, the answer is reduce the number of columns loaded into the data model to only what is necessary. That means only load the columns that are required and don't load the columns which are not required. Optimize data types to use most appropriate and efficient types, right? Use relationships and filters effectively to limit the amount of data loaded and processed. Use calculated measures instead of calculated columns whenever possible. And leverage query folding to push operations back to the data source for faster processing. So these are the questions for this slide. We will be moving to the next more questions in the further videos. So stay tuned and subscribe to the channel so that you won't miss any of the particular video, and you will get notified, and stay tuned.